Good evening, and welcome back to the Poe Museum. Today, Edgar Allan Poe's name is synonymous with some of the greatest of American poetry, including The Raven, Annabel Lee and the Bells. But I'd like to show you a poem that Poe wrote, which he never intended you to see, which he never wanted you to read. Why don't we defy Poe's wishes and take a closer look at Spiritual Song? Here it is. This is actually a letter written to the Southern Literary Messenger, a magazine that Poe was editing in 1836. The letter's from William Maxwell, a minor poet who submitted a couple of his poems. One of them is right here. It's called Sacred Song. And Poe, as editor, of course, docketed the letter right here. It says, anonymous composition for messenger. And we know that Poe read this and that he must have liked Sacred Song because he published it in the August of 1836 issue of the Messenger. But what else is going on in his head? I think that he took a look at this and said, you know what? Sacred Song's pretty good. I think I can do better. And he was struck with inspiration. It's not often that we get to see the very moment when an author gets hit by inspiration, and he didn't have the chance to look for a blank sheet of paper. He took out his pen and he wrote on the first scrap of paper that he had at hand, which just happened to be the back of this letter. So right down there in Poe's tiny, meticulous handwriting is a short fragment of a poem called Spiritual Song, right underneath one of William Maxwell's poems that apparently he didn't like as much. So this is an unpublished poem. It's only 3 lines long. I can read it to you right now. Hark, echo, 'tis the sound of archangels and happiness wrapped. And that's it. He just stopped right there. Why did he stop this? Why did he just give up right there? Was it not quite melancholy enough for him? Or maybe he was distracted and lost his train of thought. We'll never know why he didn't quite finish this. It was kind of a dry period for Poe's poetry. In fact, that year we know of 2 other compositions he completed and published in early 1837. They're 2 Zante and Bridal Ballad, both sort of melancholy poems. And this one comes off as maybe a little bit happier. Maybe this is representing a single moment of sunshine in an otherwise melancholy body of work. But what was going through his head? What was he feeling when he wrote this? Well, I can tell you because right downstairs we have the chair in which Poe was sitting while he was editing The Messenger. And you can see it right here. The boss chopped off the back of the chair to make it uncomfortable so he'd sit up straight, not get lazy. And the original cane seat has been replaced with a tin seat. So it's not a very comfortable place to sit. That'd be not the most inspirational for writing a happy poem. But otherwise, he wasn't having such a bad time. Just a couple of months earlier, he'd married his beloved cousin Virginia. And by all accounts, they had a pretty happy home life. And also, his writing was getting national attention, although it was his criticism. His scathing book reviews were very controversial, and they really started to make a name for him up and down the East Coast. But it wasn't all roses for old Edgar Allan Poe. About this same time, Harper Brothers wrote in, the publishers, and declined to publish a book of his short stories, saying that nobody really wants a book of short stories these days. Everybody's reading novels. So about this time, Poe set to work writing his only finished novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. Also, Poe is finding himself once again in a cycle of debt that goes back all the way to his college days. He'd gotten into a plan to start a boarding house and borrowed a bunch of money to furnish it. Then the plan fell through, so now he's $200 in debt, and he was trying to borrow money to help pay off the other money he'd borrowed so he can gradually climb out of debt. It didn't work. About 6 years later, he declared bankruptcy, and one of his creditors was Rob Stannard here in Richmond, who'd loaned him $200, probably to furnish that house. So the good came with the bad, and at that moment, Poe was inspired to write this little poem. We don't know where it would have gone, but for whatever reason, Poe gave up on it. He tucked it away in a secret compartment in his writing desk, and when he either got fired or quit, depending on who you ask, he left it there in the messenger office. He never returned to this theme, never wrote anything else quite like this. So maybe it was just a passing mood and he got over it. But it wasn't until about 60 years after Poe's death that a Poe collector, James Whitty, bought Poe's writing desk, and he found this in that secret compartment. And it was passed through a series of collectors until Susan Jaffe Taine bought it at auction. And she decided the perfect place for it to live was right here at the Poe Museum, as part of her gift of over 60 Poe pieces, which she gave us in honor of the Poe Museum Centennial this year. And this April, you're going to be able to see this on display. Read it for yourself, and you'll be able to decide whether or not Poe was right to give up on this. So what do you think? Should Poe have completed this? Would it have become one of his greatest hits? Or was he right to give up on it and chuck it away in his writing desk? Let us know in the comments what you think. And if you'd like us to help preserve precious Poe pieces like these, why not become a patron at patreon.com/PoeMuseum. And I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight and leave you with more footage of the Poe Museum cats.